To the world, I am a name that does not exist. A number on a file that gets shredded every 6 months. But to my family, I am the daughter who couldn't figure out her life. The one who drives a government van delivering nutrition packages to seniors across the lower mainland and calls it a career. I'm 29 years old. I have a Q-level security clearance, a commendation from the RCMP commissioner, and a scar on my left shoulder from a job I'm not allowed to describe. I also have a mother who still introduces me at parties by saying she works for some delivery program. Very sweet of her, really. My name is Tessa, and for 3 years I let them believe every word. It started before the job, honestly. My older brother Derek was always the one who made sense to my family. He went to Queen's University, got his MBA, married a woman named Sandra, whose family owns 3 Tim Hortons franchises in Oakville. They have a house with a finished basement and a pillager neither of them use. My parents talk about Derek the way people talk about a good investment, reliably, proudly, often. Then there's me. I studied political science at UBC, which my mother described to her friends as something to do with voting. I never corrected her. I graduated near the top of my cohort, got recruited through a process I still can't fully explain to anyone, went through 18 months of training that nearly broke me twice, and came out the other side doing work that genuinely matters, work that by its nature requires me to be invisible. The cover was my handler's idea. She sat across from me in a grey office in Ottawa with a coffee she never touched and said, "You need something boring, something nobody asks follow-up questions about." We went to a few options. I landed on a federal nutrition outreach program, delivering meal kits and grocery boxes to low-income seniors across Greater Vancouver. I actually did it 2 mornings a week as part of maintaining the cover. I got to know some of the seniors on my route. A woman named Edith in Burnaby who always saved me a butterscotch, a retired fisherman in East Farn who called me kiddo and meant it warmly. It was fine, more than fine, some weeks. The problem was my family. My mother called every Sunday, not because she was worried about me. I think she genuinely believed I was safe, if slightly disappointing, but because Sunday was the day she organized information. What Derek was doing, what Sandra was doing, what their kids were doing, and then a brief slot at the end for me. "How's the delivery route?" "Good, Mum." "Did you put in for that supervisor position?" "Still thinking about it." Long pause. "Tessa, you can't drive a van forever." I would look at whatever secure document was open on my other screen and say, "I know, Mum." I want to be clear, I was not a martyr about it. There were moments, especially early on, when I thought about correcting the record, saying something small, letting one true thing slip. But my cover wasn't just for strangers on the street, it was total immersion. My handler had been explicit. Anyone who knew the truth was a vulnerability, including family, especially family. So I drove the van 2 mornings a week, wore the vest with the program logo, and smiled at Edith when she gave me butterscotch. The rest of the time, I was someone else entirely. The thing about my brother Derek is that he's not a bad person. I want to say that clearly because the story that's coming could make him sound like one. He's just someone who measures love through comparison. He grew up watching my parents celebrate achievement, and he became very good at achieving things they could see. He can't help that some of his confidence comes at my expense. It's a habit older than either of us. But habits still hurt. He called me the October before everything happened. His wife Sandra was pregnant with their 3rd, and they were throwing an early celebration at their house in Oakville. Not a shower exactly, more of a gathering. Family dinner, some friends, her parents flying in from Halifax. He wanted me there. "Of course," I said. "Sandra's parents are pretty, owed money. Her dad keeps asking what everyone does." I understood what he was telling me without him having to say it. "I'll keep it vague," I said. "Just maybe don't mention the van." There it was. I almost said something then. The sentence was right there, Derek. I work for the federal government in a role I genuinely cannot describe to you, and one day you'll understand that. But I let it go. I booked a flight to Toronto, packed a bag, and 2 weeks later, I was standing in my brother's living room holding a sparkling water I didn't want, while Sandra's father, a man named Clifford, who had the energy of someone who'd never once been told no, asked me what I did for a living. Federal program, I said. Nutrition outreach. He tilted his head. Like a nutritionist? More logistics. Derek appeared at my elbow with the precision of someone who'd been watching. She coordinates deliveries, he said pleasantly to Clifford, and then turned to me with a smile that meant stay on script. I stayed on script. The dinner itself was fine until it wasn't. My mum had flown in from Kelowna. She was 3 glasses of wine into the evening and feeling generous with information. I watched it happen from across the table. She was talking to Sandra's mother, a elegant woman named Helen who asked polite questions and actually listened to the answers, which was more than I could say for most people in that room. Tessa's always been the free spirit, my mum said. I heard it clearly across the table. Derek was the driven one. Tessa she does her own thing. The delivery program she's in is very sweet. They bring groceries to seniors. Helen smiled. That sounds meaningful. Oh, it is. For what it is. For what it is. I set my fork down very carefully. Clifford had caught the thread now. He looked at me with the particular expression of someone recalibrating, reassigning me to a lower shelf. Good for you, though, he said. Honest work. And then Derek laughed. Not a cruel laugh. More like a reflex, a social smoothing. But it landed in the room like a dropped plate, and everyone heard it. I looked at my brother. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Sandra touched his arm. The conversation moved on. But I sat there and thought about a night in Winnipeg, 18 months earlier, when I was lying on a concrete floor in a building I wasn't supposed to be in, waiting for an extraction team, running through the breathing exercises my trainer had taught me. I thought about that version of me at this table, and something went very quiet inside my chest. I did not cry. I did not excuse myself. I ate the rest of my dinner, complimented Sandra's mother on the dessert she'd brought from a bakery in Forest Hill, and helped clear the table after. This is the part that people in the comments of my videos always get frustrated about. Why didn't I say something? Why do these women just take it? Here is the honest answer. It wasn't passivity, it was precision. There is a difference between silence born from fear and silence born from discipline. I had been trained to hold information under pressure. My family at the dinner table was not by any professional measure pressure, it was just sad. What I could not have anticipated was the following morning. I was upstairs in Derek's guest room when my phone buzzed. Not the personal one, the other one. The one with no case on it that I kept in the inner pocket of my jacket. The message was short. Standard brevity. Priority shift. Package in transit. Toronto intercept. Toronto intercept. I read it twice. Then I looked at the time. It was 7:42 a.m. I want to explain something about how this kind of work operates, because the drama of it sounds invented until you understand the mechanics. There are people in this country, and I mean specific people, named people, people with protected status, who move through Canadian cities quietly, for reasons the public rarely hears about until years later, if at all. My job, in the structure I worked within, was adjacent to their protection. Not primary security, more like the layer underneath the layer. The part that makes sure the infrastructure holds so the visible part can function. The message meant that one of those people was moving through Toronto. The original schedule had changed, and I was the closest qualified asset. I changed clothes, put on the jacket, and went downstairs. My mother was already in the kitchen. She was making tea in Derek's Keurig with the focused displeasure of someone who preferred a proper kettle. She looked up when I came in. "You're up early." "I have to head out for a bit." She set her mug down. "Tessa, you're not on your route. You're in Toronto." Something came up with work. She gave me the look, the one that meant this is what I mean. "You can't just leave. Sandra's parents are still here. It looks." "I'll be back by noon." "You don't even know what you'll be doing. It's a Saturday." I zipped my jacket. I know exactly what I'll be doing. She said something else as I went through the door. I didn't catch all of it. Something about priorities, something about the family thinking I was strange. I got into the rental car I'd driven from the airport, pulled up the secondary navigation on my phone, and followed the route to an address near the exhibition grounds. I won't describe the next 2.5 hours in detail because I genuinely cannot. What I can tell you is that it involved a parking structure on Fleet Street, a man I'd never met in person but whose file I knew by memory, and a miscommunication between two agencies that could have become something much worse than it did. We contained it. My hands were steady the whole time. They always are in the field, it's only afterward that they shake. I was back at Derek's by 11:50. Sandra was in the kitchen feeding the kids. She looked at me with the mild surprise of someone who'd half forgotten I existed. Everything okay? Fine, I said. Work thing. On a Saturday? Seniors don't take weekends off, I said, and she laughed and I went upstairs to change. The gathering that afternoon was smaller, just family. Clifford and Helen had gone back to their hotel. It was my mum, Derek and Sandra, the two kids running around the backyard, and Sandra's younger sister who was visiting from Montreal and mostly stayed on her phone. Comfortable and ordinary in the way that family gatherings can be when the performance pressure is off. My mother brought up the morning when we were sitting outside. She just disappeared for 3 hours, she told Derek, not looking at me, on a Saturday, for the delivery job. Derek looked at me with a slightly helpless expression. He was trying, I think, to signal that he wasn't part of this. There's a protocol when someone on the senior list has an issue, I said. I'm on call. On call, my mother repeated as though the concept were novel and faintly absurd. For meal kits. She said it to Derek, not to me. That was the thing. I was right there, and she said it to my brother. Derek set down his beer. He opened his mouth. And that is when the front door bell rang. Sandra went to answer it. I heard voices in the front hall. Her voice surprised and deferential, and another voice I recognized immediately, not from memory, from training. There are certain voices you are taught to recognize before you ever meet the person. Cadence register, the particular rhythm of authority that comes from spending years in rooms where what you say determines outcomes. I stood up. Sandra appeared in the back door. Her face was doing something I'd never seen it do before. Tessa, she said carefully, there's someone here for you. My mother turned. Derek turned. I walked to the kitchen and into the front hall, and standing in the doorway of my brother's house in Oakville, Ontario on a Saturday afternoon in October was the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP. His name is public record, so I can say it, Martin Calloway. He'd been Deputy Commissioner for 2 years. Before that, he'd run the National Security Division for a decade. He was in plain clothes, which somehow made it more striking. Navy jacket, no tie. Two people behind him who were definitely not there to hold his briefcase. He looked at me and said, Warrant Officer, I'm sorry to come to you directly. We have a situation that requires your specific context, and the secure line was giving us trouble. I heard my mother make a sound behind me. Give me 2 minutes, I said. He nodded and stepped back to give me the doorway. I turned around. My mother was standing at the entrance to the kitchen. She had one hand on the wall. Derek was behind her, and he looked. I can only describe it as recalibrated, like a spreadsheet that had just been given a new variable and was still computing. I looked at my mother first. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. There was no flash of satisfaction, no part of me thinking good. What I felt was something closer to grief, actually. For the 3 years of Sunday phone calls, for the dinner table the night before, for the look on Clifford's face. I need to step out, I said. Tessa. My mother's voice was very small. What? There'll be time to talk about it, I said, not right now. I turned back to Martin Calloway, and we walked out the front door together. I was gone for 4 hours that time. When I came back, the house was quiet. The kids were in bed. Sandra was in the kitchen doing dishes and didn't say anything when I came in, just nodded once in a way that felt like respect. Derek was in the living room. He stood up when he saw me. Mum went to bed, he said. Okay. He looked at me for a long moment. He had the expression of a man who was trying to reconfigure something large and wasn't sure where to start. How long? He said. 3 years in this role. Before that, 2 years of training and assessment. He sat back down slowly. The van. The van is real. I drive it Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Edith in Barnaby saves me butterscotch. He was touched over this. He didn't. I said something at dinner last night. You did? I'm sorry. I sat down across from him. I know. There was a long silence that wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but had weight to it. The particular weight of something being restructured between two people who have known each other their whole lives. Does Mom know the whole thing? He asked. She knows as much as I can tell her, which is more than I told her last night. He nodded. He picked up his beer, looked at it, set it down. You're good at it? The actual job. I thought about the parking structure on Fleet Street, my steady hands, the breathing exercises on a concrete floor in Winnipeg. Yeah, I said, I am. He nodded again, slowly like he was filing that somewhere new. I went upstairs and knocked on the guest room door where my mother was. She said, come in. She was sitting on the bed in her robe with her reading glasses on and a book she clearly hadn't been reading. When she saw me, she took her glasses off. I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't have a speech prepared. I'd never planned for this particular version of the conversation because I hadn't planned for a deputy commissioner showing up at a family gathering in Oakville on a Saturday. I can't tell you everything, I said. I won't be able to tell you everything for a long time, maybe ever. She was quiet. But I need you to understand that what I do is not small, and it was never small. She looked at her hands in her lap. I told Helen it was sweet, she said, for what it is. I heard you. She closed her eyes. I didn't know. No, I said, but you also didn't ask. That landed harder than I intended, but I left it, because it was true and I'd earned the right to say it once without taking it back. She reached out and put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything else. Neither did I for a while. Eventually she said, Are you safe? Most of the time. The scar on your shoulder? I looked at her. You noticed that. I'm your mother. I thought about the concrete floor in Winnipeg again, about Edith and her butterscotch, about Martin Calloway standing in the doorway in his navy jacket, about the person I'd been at that dinner table the night before, sitting still, fork down, something quiet happening inside my chest. I'm safe, I said. And I'm good at what I do. That's all I can give you right now. She squeezed my hand once. That's enough, she said, and then softer, almost to herself, that should have always been enough. I flew back to Vancouver on Monday morning. The van was in the parking lot at the program depot, same as always. I put on the vest with the logo, loaded the boxes, and drove out to Burnaby. Edith was waiting at her door. She had the butterscotch already in her hand. You look tired, she said. Family weekend. She made a sound of deep understanding. Come in for a minute, she said. I'll put the kettle on. I left the remaining boxes in the van and went inside. The kettle went on. She asked about my brother without knowing anything about him, just filling the space the way she always did, and I told her he was fine. That we'd talked. That things were different now in a way I couldn't entirely explain. Better different or worse different? She asked. I thought about it. Better, I said. I think. She handed me a mug. The tea was too hot, but I held it anyway, both hands around the warmth of it. That's the thing about family, Edith said. They always think they know you, but they only know the version you gave them. She looked at me over her glasses. Sometimes you have to give them a new one. I drove the rest of the route with the window cracked, even though it was October and cold. The kind of cold that comes off the water and gets into your collar and doesn't apologize. I didn't mind it. I had stopped apologizing for things that didn't require an apology a long time ago. I keep thinking about Edith handing me that butterscotch the Tuesday after everything happened. She didn't know what had changed. She just knew I looked tired and put the kettle on. There's something in that, in the fact that the person who treated me most like a whole human being was a woman in her 80s in Burnaby who only knew me as the delivery girl who showed up twice a week. She never needed me to be more than I was in that moment. My own family needed me to be something they could explain at a dinner table. That gap is what I've been sitting with. I don't think my mother is a bad person. I don't think Derek is either. But there's a particular kind of damage that comes from people who love you measuring that love through what they can show others. They weren't cruel. They were just incurious. They never asked who I actually was because they had already decided, and the version they decided on was easier to carry around than the truth. That's not malice. It's laziness of the heart. And it costs more than people realize, both to the one being reduced and to themselves when the bill finally comes due. The bill came due on a Saturday afternoon in Oakville. What I know now and couldn't have articulated 3 years ago is that integrity isn't about being recognized. It's about staying true to what you know to be real when no one around you can see it. Every Sunday phone call where my mother asked about the supervisor position, and I said I was still thinking about it. I wasn't lying to protect myself. I was holding a line that existed for reasons larger than my own comfort. There's a kind of quiet intelligence in that, in understanding that not every truth belongs to every moment. Knowing when to speak and when to wait is not weakness, it's judgment. And judgment is something you build slowly, the same way you build anything that actually holds weight. The harder thing, the thing I'm still working on, is what my mother said at the end. That should have always been enough. She meant my competence, my dedication, the fact that I was good at something real. She was right. It should have been. But I also know I let years pass without pushing back even gently, without offering them a new version of me, even within what I was allowed to say. I told myself it was discipline, some of it was. Some of it was also just easier to stay invisible at home than to fight for space I wasn't sure I'd get. That part is on me. Strength isn't only what you do in a parking structure on Fleet Street with steady hands. It's also what you do at a dinner table when someone talks past you to your brother. I'm working on that second kind. Edith asked me if it was better, different, or worse, different, and I said better, and I meant it. But better doesn't mean resolved. It means the foundation shifted, and now we're all standing on something more honest, which is less comfortable but more real. Derek and I talk differently now. My mother asks different questions on Sundays. Small things. But small things, compounded over time, are how anything actually changes. The van is still in the depot. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, same as always. Some things stay exactly where they belong.